Like, for example, yesterday we launched this token called VMPX that gained to the 50 million market cap within an hour of launch. So it's never actually, I mean, at least to us, it never happened on Ethereum. So
what is VMPX? What is VMPX?
It's our token. We launched it. And that's what caused congestion yesterday. That caused Binance to panic. $4 billion were withdrawn by Binance. And the flippening was caused by our launch. We were minted out in 6 hours.
What does the token actually do? So if I hold a VMPX token, what am I actually holding?
You're holding an ordinal that is part of the BRC20 ecosystem. It is one of the largest communities that we represent, called Zen, just entered Bitcoin blockchain. And we caused all of that congestion. So when you hold it, you hold value. You hold value of the community. You also hold, you have a certain affinity with the ideology, which we call first principles. First principles is closely modeled to the Satoshi's white paper, which is immutability, open source, decentralization, no admin keys and no pre-mining of any kind, and fair launch, specifically fair mint, as it happened yesterday. And the token was minted out in 6 hours.
I mean, can I crudely liken it to an NFT or a meme coin in terms of the fact that what you're buying is you're buying ideology and community. You're not actually buying specific utility. You're not buying a specific protocol like an exchange or a piece of software. You're buying acceptance of ideology, right?
If you compare it to NFTs, it's a hybrid between an NFT and a meme token, basically. So it's a hybrid between the two.
Zen, you were saying?
Yeah, so there's a few things there to comment on. First is the concept of fungibility on Bitcoin. I mean, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, 100 million Satoshis is 100 million Satoshis. But what we could see that when you inscribe something on an individual Satoshi, that can actually be more valuable than a Bitcoin. And we saw this a few months ago, I think it was March 1st, when someone inscribed a poop emoji on one Satoshi and it became more valuable than one Bitcoin. So we can add value to individual Satoshis. Now, for an NFT, in order to be a non-fungible token, it needs to be attached to something on chain. It needs to have an owner and it needs to be transferable. So this hasn't been possible before because you couldn't track individual Satoshis, but now you can. So there's basically two ways you can assign a picture or arbitrary data to an ordinal, and that's with an on-chain or off-chain commitment. So what we are seeing now is basically if you standardize the process of inscribing something and you find consensus in the way that this can be viewed as a standard for fungible tokens, and it seems like a lot of people are, then you can create a framework for creating fungible tokens on Bitcoin. So what we wanted to do, because we come from a world on Ethereum where we launched, we talk about the first principles of crypto. So it's decentralization, transparency, peer-to-peer transactions, did I say censorship resistant, decentralization, etc. So those things are, and how can you distribute, how can you create a token and how can you distribute it in a fair way? And we looked at the current BRC20 tokens that were distributed, and we thought that we could improve it a lot. So we wanted to create a token that was distributed in a fair way with a fair launch and had as many token holders as possible. So you can see that after a launch, there was only one holder that managed to get more than 1% of the supply. So it's the most distributed token on the market. You see Ordi number 1 on that list there. They were first. That was the first fungible token to be inscribed on Bitcoin. But then you can see that we are number 2 on this list right now when it comes to market cap. We have very high liquidity. We have the highest liquidity right now, and we have the highest amount of holders out of all the BRC20s. So we have 9,489 holders currently.
So I love what you guys are saying. And as I said, it reminds me, it looks like it's a better version of an NFT, and it's a better version of a meme community.
It's immutable on chain, right? So the standard, the default is that everything is immutable. And on Ethereum, where we come from, most of the NFTs are not stored on chain. They're stored off chain. The NFTs we have, we call them ZenFTs. They are per default stored on chain. It's only 3 lines of code hooking up the gradient in Ars NFTs, basically. But most of them are stored off chain. So this is kind of cool that everything is on chain per default.
So there are a lot of these I'm going to call them meme tokens, community tokens. Let's call them community tokens. So there are a lot of these community tokens in this list. But from what I understand, there are also a lot of tokens here which actually represent what an ERC20 would represent, which is a utility token, so to speak. So potentially like a Oshi, which is purporting to build an exchange, right? Would that then be the utility token of the exchange? But the exchange would work on the Bitcoin standard and not on the ERC20 standard.
So the way I see it, people directly talk about the utility. The way I see it, this is new technology, it's experimental technology. It's amazing in many ways. It's different. It has its pros, it has its cons. The first thing with anything when you're creating value is to figure out how can you create it in a way that makes sense? How can you distribute it to as many holders as possible? And then how can you trade it in a way that is following what we like to call first principles as much as possible? So the development in the space is incredible. It moves incredibly fast, and people are already figuring out how you can trade these fungible tokens in a decentralized way, on a decentralized access, et cetera, et cetera.
You were going to say something, Jack?
Yeah, so I was going to say that there is really no smart contracts on the Bitcoin blockchain at this point. So hence, there's really no utility. The only way that you can gain utility is that you can buy the token and then somehow exchange it for something else. That is the only thing that is currently possible in Bitcoin. So unlike Ethereum, you can actually do some kind of DeFi and et cetera, et cetera. Here, for example, we launched VMPX, which is a community token, but we will give it utility in the near future that will, for example, plug into the Ethereum ecosystem also. But mostly it's due to its economic energy and not necessarily any sort of DeFi applications.
So you just mentioned something quite interesting. Do you think that BRC20 actually becomes the bridge between Bitcoin and Ethereum?
That is what we're working on.